Now, back in the days when pretty much all the bikes were air cooled, they had a different look. One of the things that was very different back in the day, you could see the motor. And of course, as technology progressed and water cooling came into being, oil cooling in Suzuki's case, little by little they started covering up the motor because you didn't have to see it. You could hide it behind a fairing or some plastic or some kind of little cowling or something. But back in the day, in the 80s and before the 80s, looking at the motor was part of a motorcycle, a big part, a part that made it either attractive or unattractive. When you'd spend the time to polish it, everybody'd notice it. And in modern days, of course, the modern bikes, even the ones in my collection, some of them have the engine. You cannot even tell how many cylinders there are unless you count the pipes. But back in the day, and I always say back in the day, I don't know what that really translates into, but I know when I look at this bike and get it ready for a ride, I love it. Now, the fact is, when radiators came into being a common thing on motorcycles, and then as they are now a dominant thing, it's a wonderful thing to have these liquid cooled bikes. They make tremendous power, among other things, but they do change the way a motorcycle looks. Now, it's all in the eye of the beholder. I know a lot of people. I've heard Jay Leno say, he likes a certain thing on British motorcycles. Some people like the look of really old bikes, and some people like the look of modern, origami styled Kawasaki's or Ducatis with wings. But it's all in the eye of the beholder. But for me, being 80 years old now, I look back and I think, what are the beautiful motorcycles that I've been lucky enough to own in my life? And the engine was one of the things that always made them beautiful. And I remember back in the day, of course, when guys would buy a Triumph or a Sportster or whatever, and the first thing is they'd polish the engine, polish this, polish that. It was a race to see who could get the most polished parts on the bike. Nowadays, carbon fiber is a big thing, and anodized parts, and these, I call them gold plated, but they're really some kind of plastic plating on stuff. And it's all very unique and nice, but there's something about a really old school bike that you can see the engine on, and the engine is all polished. Now, I remember just like it was yesterday, back in 1972, I had gotten a Water Buffalo Suzuki, a 750 two-stroke triple. It had a radiator. It was the first bike I ever owned that had a radiator. First bike I ever saw with a radiator. And they actually at that point in time, they had the engine all polished up. I just remember thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. Now, the only problem was I went down to where most of my friends were hanging out with Triumphs and Sportsters, and they saw the bike for the first time, and they, what's that radiator doing there? Looks like a car, looks like a this or that or whatever. And they poo-pooed the heck out of it. And from a styling point of view, I didn't think it was terrible, but then my friends, they were not ahead of the learning curve, that's for sure. And what's funny is now looking back, every manufacturer has liquid cooled bikes, pretty much. I wonder if these people ever at some point in time said, I guess we were on the wrong side of history here. The Radiators were coming down the road, and we just never saw them coming down the road. But this bike is really one of the last of the real totally air-cooled bikes, and I think because it's totally air-cooled, it has that really the look that I like anyway. Not that I like it, I love it. And one of the funny things about motorcycling in general is there's always the trendy things that come, and 2 or 3 years later you wonder what were they thinking. They're like bell bottoms. But this bike somehow, and I think the air cooling is a big part of it, the fact that that engine, aesthetically pleasing. I love looking at the four pipes right in the front of the bike. And originally this exhaust system is an 86, they were black chromed. And as the years have gone by, the black is kind of worn off, but it's left a beautiful coating of chrome on everything. And I don't know if that's typical of all the bikes, or maybe I've just over polished them over the years. But I love the sound of that 86 exhaust system. And there's certain things about this bike. Now, because it's an air-cooled bike, there's a little bit of a rattly, rumbly sound when you just start the bike up, that a water-cooled bike has a different sound. And needless to say, the fins generate some of that, let's call it music. But if this bike were totally water-cooled and you could somehow cover the engine up with a little cover, I don't know that and put a big radiator in front, I don't know that it would be aesthetically as pleasing. Now, but the argument is, and there's certainly a big part of motorcycling, that their dominant thing is performance. And it's hard to argue that the modern bikes with the liquid cooling and, well, all of the modern features of the bikes that they have make them performance-wise just unbelievable. The traction control, the ABS, all the things like my MT-09 has that are just unbelievable. But the one thing it doesn't have, it's not air-cooled, and the motor is not as aesthetically pleasing as this is. But again, the beautiful part about it is, it's all in the eye of the beholder. But the evolution of motorcycles goes on whether we like it or not. And that's why it's important to me to hang on to some of these pieces that I have in my humble collection of motorcycling history, the RD as an example, this bike as the primary example. Because to me, this was a time I lived in and I look back at, and I enjoy reliving in my mind anytime I'm out on this motorcycle. The overdrive gearing that Vlad got me, the 530 chain. If you ever take the 630 chain and sprockets off, you could use them for boat anchors. The replacement kit that they make for this bike, I don't know how many pounds it is, much lighter. Then you take a spare front disc and put it on where the back disc is. That knocks a few pounds off too. And in the end of it, these pounds start to add up. But one thing you don't have to account for on this bike is you're never going to have the radiator leak. Now, when you think of the final design of the Gs1100, the E model, the one that I have, there's so many things about it to like. The fact it doesn't have a radiator is just one of them from an aesthetic point of view. The fact that the valves are super easy to adjust, there's no shims, you don't have to buy a bucket full of replacement shims. It's very easy to do most of the maintenance on the bike. The engine is totally bulletproof. There's no case to be made that this engine isn't one of the best ever made. And just ask anybody that drag races. That's always and if they don't break the engines, you're not going to break it riding around to the local hamburger place. Now, no matter where I go, I try to enjoy the scenery. The nice part about the bike, it's a thrilling bike to ride, but it loves to cruise too. and just take in the beautiful scenery every mile you ride. And when you combine the fact the bike is so comfortable to ride, even on these bumpy back roads that I really do enjoy riding in, on a hot summer day, you're in the shade almost the whole time except for the ride up and back. There's just the combination of things that this bike offers, and then the fact that it, from this point on, will absolutely never go down in value, and you never have to register again. It's historically registered. And as I look back 43 years, 80,000 miles, I'm going to be 80 years old. I always say, and I mean it with my heart, this bike, when I got it, I fell in love with it right away. I never in my wildest dream knew I'd have it when I was 80 years old, and never knew it would be in this decent of a shape. In fact, some people think it's pretty cool. But for every person, there's going to be something appealing or not appealing about this bike, that bike, the styling, the power output, the torque curve, the fact that you have to spend a ton of money either maintaining it or not maintaining it. There's so many things to consider, and my good friend Joe Roselli has the best saying. I've repeated it so many times. No matter what your friends ride, or no matter what they say, ride the bike that you like. And for me, I stuck with that Suzuki with the Radiator. Even though my friends were all poo-pooing it and everything, I wound up making a cafe racer out of it. That video is on the channel. Just look up the word water buffalo. And it's not fair to end the video without giving credit to the fact that water cooling and radiators have made the performance that we have in all the motorcycles now, my R1, my MT-09, all of the bikes that dominate the world right now, whatever bike you seem to think is the best, they're pretty much all water cooled. But I never have forgotten the history and having the historic plates on the bike, and the nostalgia that this bike brings back to me, and the fact that I love to just polish that engine. Any chance I get to spend a little time relaxing, listening to some Steely Dan and just sitting there with the Meguiar's polish and polishing it up. This bike is a very, very special part of my collection, and not worth mentioning, but one of the bikes that does not have a radiator. And a final note, one of the things I wish, and I'll never get it back, I wish I never sold my Water Buffalo. As ugly as that Radiator was, and as aggravated as my friends were looking at it, that bike was so much fun to ride. It became a great cafe racer that was on the cover of the magazine, more than one magazine in fact. And that article that's been written about it, just fun. But the thing I remember about it, that was the turning point that I remember motorcycles from that point on, more and more and more had radiators. And this is kind of the end of the line. This is somewhere near the end of when motorcycles did not have radiators. Now, if you're new to our channel, we have a very, very eclectic channel. One of the new features we have now is some of the videos are grouped into groups that you can access all the videos for one category in one mouse click. And it should be very convenient and very handy. Just check out the feature on the main screen, playlists. And thanks to everybody for supporting the channel. We appreciate your support, and it makes this channel possible with all the things we do, the painting, the wheels, the polishing. And please take a second or two and hit the like button. And thanks everyone for watching.